You don't necessarily remember specifically when you learned the material. You just know you learned it. You've committed it to memory.
So this is actually one of the tests. They ran 2 tests on people. There's a list of A words like window or highway. So if you see the word window, you put the word baseball afterwards, right? They ran this the first time with just A and E. One group would stay awake and then take the test, and another group would sleep and then take the test, right? They ran a second test with interference. So now they're trying to mess with your brain, right? So now you see window, then you learn baseball, right? And then they'll teach you again, and then they'll say window and notebook, right? And then they'll test you on the original information. So you have to recollect at the very beginning. And so this was a really interesting to me. Without interference, they're pretty close. They're about 10% difference. With interference, it jumps to almost a 40% difference on your ability to recollect information based on having sleep or not having sleep. So what it does is it essentially tells you that it solidifies information within your brain. So you're able to recall it better regardless of what new information you put in. So it's not like that late night cram session where you're trying to memorize everything and then you take a test and I just can't remember what happened. Right, so this will actually put it more into your brain. And I mean just a drastic difference on taking a nap since you're doing nothing except for sleeping. And that helps it solidify within your memory so that you can recall it at a later period, regardless of what other new information that you learn.
Technical difficulties.
Try pressing the button in the back when you press the beginning, on and off.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, guys. Alright, so I just wanted to just make one more point on this, just on the fact that interference, basically what the point of presenting that study was, for example, if you go about your day and say you study in the morning or you study in the afternoon or so, and then you go about your day, you do other things, you may read something that doesn't necessarily relate to your class, or you could just be, reading just for leisure. That could potentially have interference in your ability to recall the memory the following day. But if you have been well rested and you've had a solid amount of sleep, like the recommended 9 hours, that the impact of the interference of other information on the memory that's important to you that you want to recall will be greatly decreased, as you can tell. Sleep definitely counteracts the effects of information interference. So.
Yeah, and imagine you sleep, you don't sleep that night, you do it all night, and you're trying to study and cram for exams. It's kind of defeating the purpose of what you could potentially be doing during sleep. You think it's like you're wasting time, you need to not sleep so that you can study as much as possible. And really, this is what's going to help you store this memory. It's help you recall it.
So this is just kind of something neat that I wanted to present is the consolidation of declarative memories associated with slow wave sleep, primarily in the quarter one. Slow wave sleep is part of the non-REM stage of sleep, and it's essentially stage 3 and 4, that's considered deep sleep, slow wave sleep. And they performed an experiment where it's called direct current stimulation, where you place electrodes on the prefrontal cortex of the individual, and while they're sleeping, it'll stimulate that region of the brain, and that'll increase your slow wave sleep, and essentially that will lead to a further consolidation of information. So it's just something that scientists found out. So.
Alright, so now I'm going to talk about sleeping creativity and how sleep can help you solve problems by using creative insight. So one of these individuals that used sleep to help solve his problems was Frederick August Picquet, and he was one of the founders of organic chemistry. And in one of his dreams, he actually came up with a solution, the founder of the tetravalent nature of carbon in the benzene. So basically, his dream was very vivid. He saw a lot of snake-like figures. And in particular, we saw the snake, which was basically eating its own tail, so it's twirling in a circle. And it was because of this dream after he woke up that he discovered he found the Pythagorean matrix carbon, as you can see in the picture there. So another individual who used sleep to his advantage was Otto Louis, and he was the discoverer of the neurochemical transmission between the neurons, so how neurons communicate. And prior to this time, people believed that neurons communicate electrically, and he proved them wrong. So he drank 2 times. The first time he dreamed, he wrote down everything about what he dreamed about. But the thing is, his writing wasn't legible, so he basically couldn't do anything. So he had another dream, and this time he actually performed the experiment. And by morning, he actually came up with a solution that it was that neurons do communicate chemically, and he called this chemical cleft communication. So the results for sleeping creativity is that sleeping helped these individuals solve their problems by creative insight. And creative insight can be applied to students like you and me. For instance, if you're writing a paper and you're writing, and then you get stuck and you don't know what else to write about, it's good to take a break, sleep, start writing it the next morning. You're going to do most likely better than if you just continue, because sleeping will help you develop these skills. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is alcohol and sleep. And I think this is a topic that's useful for college students especially, because we've all been to parties, football games, and there's always been alcohol available. But I want to talk about the dangers of using alcohol and how it can impact your memory and forming and consolidating new memories. So this task involved the complex cognitive test, otherwise known as the symbolic logic task. There's 3 groups. There's a control group, and then there's 2 experimental groups. Experimental groups were called Alcohol Night 1 and Alcohol Night 3. So basically this is how it works. So in the control group, you study the complex cognitive test on day 1, and you sleep, and on day 7 you're tested on it. And for the experimental groups, it's basically the same thing, except alcohol is involved this time. So you study the complex test on day 1, you have alcohol on night 1 right before you go to sleep, and you're tested on day 7. And for night 3, alcohol night 3 is the same thing, except you have alcohol on the 3rd night before you go to sleep, and then you're tested again. So basically this is our experimental design. So as you can see the control group, they had no alcohol. Alcohol night 1 in the red, you had alcohol before you slept, and alcohol night 3, you have alcohol on the 3rd night before you slept. So the results of this experiment is that for the control group, there was no difference. Whatever they learned, they basically got 100% of their exam 7 days later. However, for the people who had alcohol on the first night, they retained roughly half of the information. So 50% they retained for the exam on day 7, 50% they lost. They just forgot about it. Now for night 3, it was slightly better, but not by much. So they retained about 60% of their information, 40% they lost it on day 7. So what the study is showing is that any amount of alcohol, especially right before bed, can be detrimental to forming new memories and performing well in exams. And this is very useful for college students. Obviously, you guys want to do well, you want to get A's, get the 4.0 GPA. So try not to drink at least 1 week prior to the exam, because this is a period when your memories are most critical. And
You said 1 week?
At least 1 week prior. If it's like 2 weeks, it's fine. I mean, obviously, no alcohol would be the best, but that's not realistic. So 1 week is a good buffer.
How much did they give them to drink? It seems like a kind of odd way to.
As little as 1 drink.
Okay.
They put over the legal limit for that.
Below, it was below 0.08. So
Wow.
this is we're not talking about like 20 drinks or 15 drinks. Even 1 drink could have an impact on your memory.
Wow.
Yeah, imagine you do drink like you normally do, more than 1 drink, and that's going to be
Then the effects will be worse. Then you probably retain 10%, 15%.
And this is directly before you go to bed.
Right, that's very important. It's not during the day. It's right before you go to bed. That's when memories are most critical. Like they're most fragile.
It's because sleep disrupts this part of the stage, REM sleep, or alcohol, disrupts your REM sleep, and that's where you consolidate these kind of memories.
So just elaborate if you're still confused. Essentially, like alcohol produces. It's not necessarily the alcohol. It's like
The byproducts
the
of
byproducts of alcohol.
The aldehydes.
Yeah, and
Acetaldehyde.
that's what actually impairs your ability to like consolidate the memory. If you technically, if you were to drink in like sometime during the day, like around noon, your body would be able to probably like get rid of the alcohol and just process it. But obviously, if you drink at night, which is most likely when you do, like you go out to a party, you drink at night, then you may only have like 2 or 3 hours where you're awake and you're drinking, you're active, and your body's active and it's metabolizing the alcohol. But if but then you sleep and then your body kind of shuts down, and that's the problem. So we're not really sure about drinking during the day on the effects of that, but definitely drinking at night.
Before bed is no.
Yeah.
So you're saying we should sober up before we go to sleep?
Exactly.
Sober up. Yeah.
I mean, maybe we just don't have studies regarding drinking during the day, but I mean, I'm pretty sure there's memories also impacted during the day. I mean, we just don't have studies to back it up. But for this one, we do. So. And this is just the graph showing how on day 1 the number of correct responses is about the same, and how on day 7 the control group is actually better in terms of correct responses. However, for the one where we had alcohol on the first night, it's about 50%, and then for night 3 alcohol, it's about 60%.
This is something that most of us are kind of used to, except for the right. I think not many of us have encountered this. Falling asleep during your studying occurs too often. You want to go to the next thing. So something you've got to try to avoid. So sleep hygiene. This is pretty much sleep regularity, how we can perfect how we go to sleep and how consolidated your sleep is, meaning how thorough and effective it is. And if any of you would like to improve your quality of sleep, this is what you should try to follow. This was developed by a professor, Dr. Walker, and this is pretty much for treating insomnia, but this really generalizes to anybody with sleeping issues. So step 1, if you're laying in bed and you can't fall asleep, try not to look at the clock. Instead, just get yourself out of bed after 20 to 30 minutes and do something that requires little energy exertion, like reading or something very mild. Try to avoid watching TV because the light stimulation can really affect you. I'm sure most of you have heard the blue lights from TVs and phones and stuff. Those really affect your sleepiness. You got to create a wind down routine if possible. Kind of mellow out a couple hours before bed. Do stuff mellow, low energy exertion again. No caffeine 8 hours before bed. That's really a huge stretch for a lot of us. I drink coffee at like 4 p.m. If I want to go to bed at, I can't do math right now, I'm tired. Midnight, right? Yeah, so avoid it if you can, if possible. Yeah, journaling, reading, electronic curfews, stay away from phones and computers and stuff. Room temperature is cool. This one's kind of odd, but in order for you to fall asleep, your body needs to drop a degree Celsius, which is kind of strange to think because you try to get warm during the night, but keep a cool room, that'll help you fall asleep. Make sure you have a comfortable bed. This was huge for me. I have really bad sleeping issues, and I got a brand new bed, and I've been loving it ever since. It's a memory foam mattress, and it really made a huge difference, and I found a really good cheap one. If you guys are interested, ask me, I'll get you a deal. And it's super helpful. But be careful with those because they kind of emit, a lot of them have these toxic chemicals. They're made with like petroleum-based substances, and you're sleeping for about a third of your night. Just inhaling these toxic fumes constantly.
Oh.
So you want to avoid that if possible.
Dang.
The next one is to make sure you go to bed and wake up at the same time every single day because our bodies really benefit from this consistency of waking up especially. Try to wake yourself up at the same time every single day. Hopefully that'll make you more tired at night so you can fall asleep early. And lastly, these kind of seem like no-brainers, but we often don't abide by them. Dimming the lights before bed and increasing the lights upon waking. So dimming the lights before bed, make sure you're kind of away from any kind of stimulation again. Increasing the lights, kind of open the blinds if you can. Turn on your lights immediately upon waking. So before your brain kind of falls back asleep. For me, I hit the alarm, or when the alarm goes off, I immediately start zoning out again and falling asleep. So the ideal thing to do, increase the light. Your brain stops releasing the sleepy chemical, the melatonin and stuff like that. To keep in mind, we often take sleep for granted. And all these things we presented are really incredibly related to sleep. It's fascinating that sleep is what kind of promotes these creative insights and declarative memory. Our overall well-being, we didn't discuss other things like immune function. It really helps you stay healthy overall in general. And imagine our cognitive capacities after getting consistent thorough sleep. So